Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Fred Lewis, and I'm the president of the National Training and Simulation Association. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome you to this, our Modeling Simulation Caucus panel, a special event that we try to do each and every year here at ITSEC. I'm really delighted to see the attendance here this morning, but for those who are in the standing room only areas, we do have a video monitor exterior to our room here, so if you are more comfortable sitting out there and watching proceedings from that position, that's perfectly okay. But if you want to stand in here, that's okay also. We are absolutely delighted to have four of our lawmakers here with us this morning from Washington, D.C., representing a couple of very important areas to us in the modeling and simulation technology and education world, and that is from southeastern Virginia and also from here in central Florida. The caucus itself was established some years ago by a visionary within the House of Representatives, and that's Congressman Randy Forbes, who remains the chair of the Modeling and Simulation Caucus. He also is currently serving as the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee, which is an absolutely critically key position to the promotion of the technologies that we represent here at ITSEC 2011. Congressman Forbes will come forward in just a moment to introduce his fellow congressmen and congresswomen, and then we're going to hear from each of them, and at the conclusion of their opening remarks, we'll engage in a question and answer session. There are question cards should be at each one of your places, and if you want those, if you want to ask a question, fill those cards out. They'll be brought up to me, and I'll hand them to Congressman Forbes to ask the panel. So, without further ado, let me ask that Congressman Randy Forbes, Chairman of the M&S Caucus and Chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee, to come forward and introduce his colleagues. Sir.
Well, thank you, Fred, and we'd like to thank all of you for allowing us the privilege of being here with you today. Thank you for the service you do for our country, and I can't think of a more important time for us to be able to call on your expertise than right now with the challenges the country's facing. Fred, I want to personally thank you on behalf of all of us for the great service that you have done in leading NTSA and for putting on this great conference. Linda, thank you for your hard work that you do on a regular basis, and for each of you who make this possible and allow us to be here. I am honored to be here also today with three of my colleagues, and I want to introduce each of them to you, and then they'll come up one at a time. And the way we would like to approach this today is to each of us offer whatever comments we feel are appropriate, and then we'd love to listen not just to your questions but to your comments as well, because part of the reason we come down here is not to tell you what we think, but to listen to you and to grapple with some of the issues that we think are important for us as a nation to partner together with. First of all, seated immediately to my right is Congressman Bobby Scott. Many of you who are familiar with the modeling and simulation industry, Bobby is certainly a friend to that industry. I said last night, I continue to say this, there is no member of Congress that I think has been more active in modeling and simulation than Bobby. I can't think of an event we've had since we started the caucus that Bobby wasn't the first one to say, I'll be there and I'll help. He is a great leader in the education area and has fought hard to make sure modeling and simulation was included in our education programs. And he is always looking at innovative ways that he can push this industry forward. He represents the 3rd Congressional District in Virginia. He is a senior member of the Judiciary Committee in the House. And Bobby, you still serving on the Budget Committee? Or, no. Okay. What other committees are you in?
Education.
On the Education Committee. But Bobby, Bobby has a wealth of expertise in budgetary issues as well, and you will see that as he responds to your questions and you listen to his comments today. Also, we're honored to have Corrine Brown with us. Corrine, this is her district, and Corrine, as many of you know, represents the 3rd District here in Florida. She served in the Florida House of Representatives for 10 years. And she's now the ranking member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. I think you're still on the Committee on Veterans Affairs as well, and the VA Subcommittee as well. And in addition to Corrine, we have with us a good friend of mine who sits on the House Judiciary Committee, Sandy Adams. Many of you know Sandy represents the 24th District here in Florida. She served in the Florida House of Representatives, and Sandy brings a unique perspective because she comes from law enforcement. She was telling us how wonderful all the gadgets were out there for anybody in law enforcement to be able to utilize, and how she wishes she'd had some when she actually patrolled this area when she was in law enforcement. So we're delighted to be with you, and I'd like at this time to ask Corrine if she'd come up and welcome you from her district, and then Congressman Scott and Congressman Adams. To give a round of applause to Congressman.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to my district. You're physically in my district, the 3rd Congressional District of Florida. And I understand that Orange County will be honoring you this week by calling this STEM Week. So we're just so happy that you're here. First of all, I'm very proud of the fact that I am on Veterans Affairs. I've been on there for 19 years, and we have the largest funding of VA in the history, and we've got this latest hospital that's going to be here that we've been talking about for 25 years, but it's the latest technology, and also in Gainesville, so we're using your technology. I know that you can't come to a meeting without getting a 1-minute update on what's going on in Washington. And I know you're wondering about the super committee, and I want you to know I didn't vote for it. You need to know that. I don't think 12 people can do the job of what was elected 435 and 100 members of the Senate. I think we need to do our job. We need to make those tough decisions. And the fact is, we ran 2 wars on the credit card, and you're not going to get out of it overnight. As my grandmama said, when you have your head in the lion's mouth, you better ease it out. And what we need to do, ease it out. What we need to do is invest in your technology. Our competition is not, I'm in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. It's other countries, and we need to invest at this time. Every economists tell you that you need to invest in order to grow the economy. Let me just say that I have some experience with your technology. I was driving the plane, training, JetBlue. I crashed into New York. Also, railroad, I crashed also. They fixed that test. So, I mean, your technology, and of course, I've been to the military assemblies here in the Central Florida area. We are one of the cutting edge as far as entertainment here in Central Florida. So what you're doing is very, very exciting to me, and jobs and opportunity. So what I'm very interested in, what are your recommendations for Congress? So I'm here to listen, hear what you have to say, and see how we can translate that into jobs and economic development for our community and our country. Thank you for being here, and God bless America.
Thank you, Randy, for your very kind introduction. And Fred, thank you for your leadership over the years. This has been a great conference, and it's a pleasure to be back. It's also a pleasure to be with my colleagues, Corrine and Sandy. There isn't much we do in Washington on a bipartisan basis, so I want to thank you for modeling and simulation, because that is one area where we get good bipartisan cooperation. Now, I represent the 3rd District of Virginia, whose businesses and colleges are very much involved in modeling and simulation, The Joint Forces Command is in the Hampton Roads, Virginia area, and although it's being, I think, disestablished is the technical term, the modeling and simulation components of that will remain in Hampton Roads. Old Dominion University, Norfolk State University, Hampton University, Langley Research Center, Jefferson Lab, Newport News Shipyard, and others are very much involved in modeling and simulation. And modeling and simulation is a great industry. It doesn't pollute, and the jobs pay a lot more than average. So it's great to be attracting jobs in modeling and simulation to the area. Now, modeling and simulation is a critical industry in this nation. It allows us to build and develop complex model systems, whether it's a car, entire battlefield, an airplane, major evacuation plans for cities, or even the human body. It's important to see what you can do with modeling and simulation. Now, the military has been using modeling and simulation for decades. The Manhattan Project developed the atom bomb using some of the earliest modeling and simulation techniques. Military and airline pilots use modeling and simulation to learn how to fly some of our most complex aircraft. Randy and I have trained, as apparently Corrine has, on a jumbo jet. We didn't even take off before we were off on the runway. I guess I have to comply with the old adage, you got to be careful about what you say about somebody who speaks after you on the program. Okay, I crashed the airplane. And the important thing is you didn't have to repair the plane. All you had to do was reboot the computer. And so a lot of cost savings can be achieved when you're using modeling and simulation. The medical students use modeling and simulation in the medical field, and other health professionals use modeling and simulation. City planners use modeling and simulation to determine traffic patterns, to reduce congestion, and to establish evacuation plans. Congress is making headway ensuring that we invest in the economy so we can, as Corrine has indicated, have the competitive advantage that we need. 3 years ago, the Higher Education Act authorization was signed into law, which included a modeling and simulation grant, specifically grants to colleges and universities to help their modeling and simulation programs. The Department of Education is going to be extremely important in modeling and simulation. Randy and I sponsored a summit recently where the Department of Education allowed us to present what was the important parts of modeling and simulation. Fred, of course, was there leading the charge. Department of Education will be very much involved in modeling and simulation, particularly in educating the next generation of workers, because we have to make sure that they're highly qualified in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and math, to make sure that we can compete with the new next generation of equipment. Getting the federal support for modeling and simulation will, of course, be a challenge with the budget mess that we have, but it will also be an opportunity, because with modeling and simulation you can actually save money, so we'll have to be doing more modeling and simulation. Some of the training, of course, is extremely expensive. Airline pilots and whatnot, you have and live battlefields is extremely expensive, and if you do it with modeling and simulation, it's much less expensive. It's also on a marginal basis. There's almost no marginal cost for additional training. And so we're going to have to, so although we have budget problems, we need to take advantage of the opportunities that we have in modeling and simulation. So I want to thank you for inviting us back. I want to thank you for all that you do for our nation with modeling and simulation, particularly with our military, and I look forward to the questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for having us here today. I am Sandy Adams, and I do represent Florida's 24th District, which is home to the National Center for Simulation and Research Parkway. And I have actually trained on some of the simulations and simulators in past, and they were a little bit less advanced as some of these here today. But I do know they do save lives. What you do here and what you are doing saves lives. And it also strengthens our military. And it's important, and we all recognize it here on this panel. And we're here to answer your questions, have an open discussion, and let you know that we support your efforts. We recognize that without you, a lot of our men and women that were wounded on the battlefield overseas recently wouldn't have made it home alive. You are saving lives, and you are strengthening our military, and you're also helping our law enforcement. I went to a simulator just recently over at Research Parkway, and I think my training as a law enforcement officer still hangs in there with me. And they kept trying to get this one simulation to increase, go ahead and aggravate the young man so he would react, so I would have to react. And it got down to they had to go ahead and gig him, so to speak, to get him to elevate his aggression so that we'd have to make a decision. But those are the things that save lives here on the streets locally, in your law enforcement officers, and it also saves lives on the military battlefield. And that's why it's so important that we in Congress recognize the extreme importance of what you do and the things that you bring to the table, and that does save money at the same time. Because instead of crashing a big Boeing jetliner or having someone injured on the battlefield that could have had the training and kept from being injured, that saves time, it saves money, and it saves lives. So thank you all for having us here. I look forward to your questions.
Well, let me first thank Corrine for allowing us to be in her district and for the warm welcome she's given all of us for being here. Certainly we appreciate Sandy's law enforcement background and someone who's actually been through this training on a career basis to bring that expertise to bear. And Bobby, you'll find that his mind never stops working on simulation issues. In fact, when we're in the D.C. traffic, I know he's told me 10 times or 100 times, why don't the governor use modeling and simulation to get this traffic under control up here? And, you know, sometime, though, enough is enough. I mean, we're traveling down here, flying down here yesterday, and I was trying to sleep, and he kept saying, these seats. And I said, what's wrong with the seats? And he said, how come they don't use modeling and simulation for when they assign these seats? So they're doing it in the wrong way, you know, and to do there. And so he's always working for you guys, and we appreciate that so much. And, you know, one of the things that I'd like to do, as Fred said, I wear a couple of hats. The hat is chairman of the Modeling Simulation Caucus and also as the chairman of the Readiness Committee, a subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee, which, as many of you know, is the largest subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. And I realize that sometimes there are national issues that so overwhelm us that they overwhelm the specific issues or reasons which would normally be the magnet drawing us together. And I think that's the case for us today as we come together talking about modeling and simulation issues, because the one question that all of us hear over and over again, and I would almost guarantee that each of you have asked this question in your minds if you haven't asked it or articulated it verbally, is this: is the future of America optimistic or is it pessimistic? And I can tell you that I believe very firmly that it is optimistic. But the reason I believe that is because I happen to believe that I don't think there's any issue that if you can bring Americans together with their brain power and their heart, that we can't solve that issue and move forward for an even better America than we had. But there's one caveat to that. I really do not see any calculus that creates an optimistic future for this country that doesn't entail a strong military. And while military has not been the end-all for modeling and simulation, it has certainly been the engine that has driven this train for a long period of time and helped expand it into so many other disciplines. And regardless of how we got to these cuts, and I'll leave that for people far smarter than I am in another venue and another time, or what the option is for how we get out of it, and there are different ways of doing it, leave that for another venue and another time. The reality is that our military, national defense, has already taken about $485 billion in cuts. And with the action that'll come from the failure of the super committee, we will more than double those cuts as we see them coming down. Bobby and I were talking on the plane coming down as we look at options. One of the things we know the President said, that he would veto any attempts to try to change these triggers from national defense. The Senate Majority Leader, Mr. Reid, has said he would not bring up any legislation that would change those triggers. We have to take them both at their word and say, if we live with those kinds of cuts, what kind of world are we looking at? Now, let me take the Navy for just a moment. Right now, a snapshot of the Navy, if we talk numbers and statistics and percentages of gross national product, it just goes over everybody's head. But if you take a snapshot of the Navy, you and I are living in a world for the last few years that none of us lived in before, because for the first time, Chinese have more ships in their Navy than we have in our Navy. And we can talk about capacity all day long, but at some point in time, numbers start equaling capacity. We're living in a world where in just 8 years, by the end of this decade, Chinese will outnumber us in subs in the Pacific 78 to 32. If we put two of our surface ships together, right now, because we haven't done any modernization of our surface missiles over this last decade, Chinese can hit us at 185 kilometers. We can only hit them 120 kilometers. And we've seen in a boldness and a moveness of assertiveness of where we've seen the Chinese that is expanding their demands upon territories. If we look at the Marines, if these cuts go into effect, the Marine Corps will have 145 to 150,000 men. General Dunford said we can't win one contingency anywhere in the world. That means Taiwan, it means South Korea, and it means Israel. We had, as you know, a strategy of winning 2 wars at one time, then 1 war and hold one. Now we'd be at a position we couldn't win one. Air Force says that since the Korean War, we haven't lost a single soldier to enemy aircraft. That air superiority, according to General Breedlove, could all be in jeopardy if these cuts come through. And the Army, of course, modernization is going to be out the window. And when we look at the impacts to our employment, Secretary Panetta has said that we could have as many losses as the entire construction industry had during the whole recession. But let's assume he's exaggerating. Let's assume it's only a third of those. It would still equal all of the unemployed people in West Virginia, New Mexico, Maine, Nebraska, Montana, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Delaware, Alaska, South Dakota, Vermont, Wyoming, North Dakota combined. Now, why is that important to modeling and simulation? Because of the role modeling and simulation plays in all of this. There are 4 questions that we have to ask for national defense. The first one is this: what is the true threat that the United States faces on any given day and for the foreseeable future? The second one is, what are the resources that our combatant commanders need to be able to successfully perform the missions necessary to protect us from those threats? The third one is, what's the most efficient way of getting those resources to our combatant commanders? And the fourth one is, what can we afford to pay? And equally important, what's the risk to the United States of America if we don't supply those resources? I would suggest to you that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, where you're on, who your leadership is, over the last several years, the only thing we've been asking is, what do we want to pay? But nobody's been asking the key question: what's the risk to the United States of America if we don't supply those resources? Modeling and simulation is the key to being able to help us ask and answer all 4 of those questions. And it's crucial that we step up to the plate and do so. And let me just offer you 4 observations that I plead with you to consider and to reach out and do. And the first one is this: don't let yourselves be convinced that there is a room somewhere with computers and great thinkers in the White House, on Capitol Hill, or at the Pentagon that's watching all these defense cuts to ensure that they will not jeopardize the national security of our nation. I can assure you it just doesn't exist. And this room must be that room. And you must be the people to ensure that does not happen by asking those questions and answering those questions. I was speaking to a group of members of Congress about 3 or 4 months ago. We were talking about these cuts, and I will tell you, the people that we were talking with were all supportive of the cuts until we started going over what it was going to do to defense. And one of them turned and said what most Americans think. They said, Randy, we thought somebody somewhere was looking over all this and making sure it wasn't going to impact the national security of this country. That hasn't happened. Second thing that I would just suggest that we need to be looking at is don't rely on government to blaze the path down which modeling and simulation must travel. When government seeks to be all things to all people and to speak a language of political correctness, elevating the avoidance of mistakes above the achievement of success, it can no longer be the catalyst of innovation America needs. You've got to be that catalyst by realizing that behind every challenge we face, there's a modeling and simulation compass pointing us to the solution we must find. We just have to find that compass and find that solution. Thirdly, don't be content with the matrix formed by the numbers and statistics currently used to describe the proposed defense cuts. Use your modeling and simulation skills to paint a picture for policymakers to see the world these cuts will create, the America these cuts will create for our children and our grandchildren. Let me give an example of that. When we hear people testify today, they talk about acceptable risk. Acceptable risk. And then we ask acceptable risk to what? And they always say to the institution or to the mission. But if you listen to you guys in uniform, you know what acceptable risk means. It means who comes back and who doesn't come back. That's a picture that modeling and simulation can paint for policymakers and Americans that no other statistic can lay out for them. And let me close this morning by telling you something that I said at the very first time that Fred was kind enough to allow me to address a modeling and simulation group. And it's this: we ought not to be running from the roar of the negativity that plays out in our minds every day. When I turn on the TV, I am bombarded with negative news. When I pick up a newspaper, it is negative news. When I connect to my internet, it is negative news. And some days, you know, I just want to go and I look at my staff and I say, can you give me some good news? I don't even care if it's accurate. Just give me some good news. You know, I want to hear. And we went back and did a study years ago about hunters, and the greatest hunters we found were lions. And lions have a unique hunting style because the way they hunt is this. Male lion goes to the beginning of the grassland, and he's too proud to crouch, so he just sits. The hunters are the lionesses. It's normally about 9 to 12 of them in a pride, and they very stealthily move to the back of the grassland, and you can't hear them, and you can't see them, and they get in position. And when they're in position, and that male lion senses it, he begins to roar. And you can literally hear the roar for 6 to 8 miles. The ground almost shakes from that power of that roar. And the animals always do two predictable things. They either become paralyzed with fear and freeze, and if they do, those lionesses move in like this invisible net and destroy them. Or they turn and run from the roar right into the clutches of those lionesses who destroy them. If only they had the wisdom and the faith and the courage to run towards the roar, they'd run right past that male lion. He can never catch them, and they'd run to safety. If ever there was a time in our history when Americans can't afford to run from the roar, it is today. And we must have the courage and the faith and the wisdom to run towards it wherever we see it, on television, the internet, and our newspapers. And you're the group that has to lead them. This is the technology that has to lead them, because you can paint a picture of what tomorrow looks like, and you can bring them back today, and you can say, choose this tomorrow or that tomorrow. That's the tomorrows that we need to give to the American people. If we do it, we'll do what generations of Americans before us have done, and we'll leave a history and a bulwark of freedom for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you all for what you do. We're looking forward to your questions at this time.
Before we get to the questions, I need 1 more minute.
Take all you want.
I don't know how many of you saw 60 Minutes last night, but it was very disturbing to me because in Seminole County, the area that I represent right here, you had people living homeless, children in cars and trucks. That doesn't make any sense in America. Now, I'm not going to speak for the administration, nor am I going to speak for the President of the Senate, but I am a member of Congress, and I know the issues that we're talking about. I don't support cutting the military. I think we need to continue to invest in the military. I come from Jacksonville, where we're a military town. But I am on transportation, and I know something about transportation. And what the discussion is, first of all, as I said earlier, we've been running 2 wars on the credit card. This is the first time ever we were in a war, and then we gave a tax break. That doesn't make any sense. So I know that the House of Representatives and the Senate are going to have some say-so as to what we cut and what we do not cut. Why is it that an oil company that made $30 billion, we're giving them $3 billion or $4 billion? So let's put everything on the table. Let's close some of the loopholes. Let's don't sacrifice the military. Let's don't sacrifice the, you know, what we've been practicing in Congress is what I call reverse Robin Hood. Robbing from the poor and working people to give tax breaks to the rich. Let's put it all on the table. Let's take a look at it. And we need to invest. You are the future, and I'm there. But the Congress is going to have to make the hard decisions. I always tell people, the president proposes, the Congress dispose.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressman Forbes, Congressman Scott, Congressman Brown, Congressman Adams, Congresswoman Adams, excuse me, for being here, for your remarks. And now, questions. It's question time, so we have some people walking through the aisles to collect the questions. Bring them up here where you have them. And if you're reluctant to write out a question on the card, please stand up and shout out your comment or your question if you have one.
I'm not answering any hard questions.
The question,
I'm trying to screen out the hard balls here and make sure that.
You can give us the hard balls.
one question's been passed to me to repeat the higher education bill promoting modeling and simulation in colleges. In the 2008 appropriations bills, in the education authorization bill, we were able to get authorization for modeling and simulation grants to colleges that already have modeling and simulation would get grants to improve their situation, and those without would have funding to start modeling and simulation. The Department of Education has been, unfortunately, a little slow in getting this underway, and that's when we had our conference trying to stimulate a little action with the administration. My expectation is after they heard all they heard and Fred showed them what the potential was, that the administration will be much more supportive of modeling and simulation generally. All of Congress and all of Washington has been, unfortunately, slow in really getting it on modeling and simulation. But several colleges, I know the ones in Hampton Roads and some in Orlando, have been extremely aggressive in modeling and simulation. And one of the things we're trying to do is if somebody graduates and has has a degree in modeling and simulation, somebody ought to know what they know. And so there ought to be a common curriculum and things like that, and that's what Fred is going to help establish.
Thank you, Congressman Scott.
We have another question here that says the future and in all likelihood current charter of conflict will involve the population at the heart of the challenge. Are we putting enough emphasis on modeling and simulation, human, sound, ethnic, cultural dimensions of conflict and joint interagency planning required at all levels. And I'll just see if either of you two would like to answer that. If not, I'll be glad to respond. And
That's fine, but let me just say, here at the University of Central Florida, we're doing the cutting edge as far as medical and technology, and I think we are one of the few that have a grant in that area.
yeah, and let me say Bobby has done a great deal of work in the educational arena, as he's mentioned, in terms of trying to get universities to focus on that. But one of the things that I would like to raise to you is, no, we're not doing enough in terms of interagency opportunities with modeling and simulation. Let me suggest to you, all of you know that Goldwater-Nichols transformed what we're able to do. No nation in the world can fight like we fight. I mean, they just can't do with the jointness capabilities. I'm a firm believer that we can't do jointness the way we need to do it without modeling and simulation, but I think we can't do it on interagency capabilities either. And one of the things that we have been working with as a caucus to try to do is something called the American Response Act. And the American Response Act would basically do this. It would be a type of Goldwater-Nichols approach for interagency opportunities. If you went back to the Bush administration, one of the difficulties they had, of course, was with Katrina, and it took weeks to respond to Katrina. If you look at the Obama administration, it was the Gulf oil spill, and it took weeks to respond to the Gulf oil spill. And one of the things that we realized somewhat by accident was that there are literally thousands of ideas across America. Sometimes they're in garages, sometimes they're in labs in small places across the country that are great solutions and good solutions, but they never get utilized. And the reason is twofold. When the president, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Democratic president or Republican president, tries to make a decision, he normally comes around a cabinet, brings the secretaries in, and the first thing is a filter that takes place. If it's not politically the right answer, it's not going to get to that table. It doesn't matter which party you're from. But the second thing is, a lot of times the cabinet secretary is in positions to protect their own careers as opposed to taking cutting-edge chances. If we had something where it was a response center with modeling and simulation, with the private sector, the public sector, and academia together, and we were geared up to cross interagency lines, then the next time we had a crisis, and there will be a next time, it's just a matter of when that is, we could be taking all of these ideas from across the country, filtering them through modeling and simulation programs, and bring the President of the United States in, whoever he is, and says, Mr. President, here's the top 3 options we have. Here's the top 3 command and control structures. You pick. But the beauty would be that he could pick on day 6 or 7 instead of 3 months down the road. That's something I think its time has come, and I hope we'll work, Fred, to try to bring about that. But that's all based on modeling and simulation capabilities.
Sure.
Let me just say that modeling and simulation sounds like a complicated word, and most of the public don't understand it. And I want to add 9/11 because part of the problem was communication, and that is an area that I think, whether it was Katrina or whether it was a Gulf, it's a real breakdown. We lost a lot of firefighters in 9/11 because of the communication was not there to communicate, and I don't understand why we don't have one system that we can be able to communicate during a disaster. And I know this is something that you could do and make it simple so people can understand it. The law enforcement or the first responders.
We do have those bands.
And
We do have it, but it's not working.
Sandy, maybe you could respond to this question and maybe a follow-up on that one. It says, in this period of economic challenges, modeling and simulation are the tool sets that will save money. How can we effectively communicate this?
Well, I think what you have is a caucus that understands it, and we are all out there singing your praises, but at the end of the day, you have to be also tooting your own horn, so to speak. And it's important that every member of Congress, whether it's in the House or the Senate, and even the administration, understand what you're capable of doing and the advances you can make and the cost savings that are attached to it, because there are cost savings. Each and every one of you know it. Each and every one of us know it. So I believe that it's to continue coming forward, giving information, spreading the word, so to speak, with all your members of Congress and the administration. Those of you in the military, you know how important it is, and sometimes I understand. I was in the military once. I'm a military brat, so sometimes The command is looking at the bottom line, and they're not really looking at the new innovative ways. They're just looking to save money. So if you can show them at the time you're showing them the new innovative ways, the way that they can save money, it helps them to go to their next chain of command and up the chain with those advancements. So I believe it's everyone's doing their part, and we're just going to have to continue to do so. I know our leader here, Randy Forbes, is a great proponent and will continue to advocate for all of us and on your behalf, because we all recognize how important it is.
Let me just add that I like Coca-Cola because they tell me I like Coca-Cola. And so part of it is communication. I mean, we've got to be able to communicate to the public and to the members of Congress and to, understand the railroad now. We understand that one train can take you so many miles and 1 gallon of gas. That's because they start advertising. So there are many ways that you can communicate, not just through the commercial. And someone mentioned earlier about the news. Well, I do like a little facts with my news. And it's very important, the bloggers, that we get adequate communication and information.
And if I can add something to that, just recently Orlando Matters had the medical simulation and showed how the technology is there and how it's improving medical care, not only just for our military men and women, but for our citizens. And so that is huge. Getting that information out is so important, because as your information gets out there and people understand it, they get a better understanding of it. It's not just for the military, say, or for the police officers, but it's for each and every one of them. The advancements that are being made are actually advancements that they will benefit from, whether it's at a local hospital or at an emergency room while traveling.
One related question we have is, what can you do to help promote modeling and simulation in Congress so that we can increase investment in modeling and simulation? And that's related to this. One thing you can do is meet with your members of Congress, invite them to train, as all of us have, so we can see firsthand how you can train on modeling and simulation. Make sure that you ask questions of your elected officials, invite them out for photo ops. But related to this question, as you make your case, show how you can save money if you're using modeling and simulation. And if you look at pilot training, how much it costs to have a plane in the air every hour compared to modeling and simulation, every hour you can reduce the actual flying is a significant savings, and particularly once you have once you've made your investment in the machinery, the marginal cost for additional pilots is virtually nothing. So that in our tight budget, you can show, and obviously people in this room have a financial interest in this, you can show how using your products you can save money. And that will be good not only for your businesses, but also for our budget, because you can save a lot of money if you look at setting up a battlefield and all the ammunition and the oil and everything else that goes into modeling and simulation on the battlefield or in pilot training or in anything else. You can go through a lot of money very quickly. And if you can show in modeling and simulation how the budget can be stretched and you can do a lot of training for a lot less money, I think in this budget climate we want to hear it.
And can I just elaborate a little bit on what Bobby said, because he's so correct. Perfect example is the X-47B. You know, if we just see what just happened, each test is $100,000. They needed to do 49 tests, and they just came back after running 5 tests and said now they need to do half as many tests because the fidelity of the modeling and simulation was so good when they constructed it that they won't have to do it. That's $100,000 a pop, as Bobby mentioned. Concrete example you can show to members of Congress that you save dollars. The second thing, though, I'll do just a little twist on what Congresswoman Brown said. People can tell you all day long what you want or what they think you need, but I really encourage you to kind of go out of the box, and I know that's a cliche, but look at what your customers really need and are telling you they need. Years ago, I watched a debate between some folks running for state office in Virginia, and they were out in Southwest Virginia, and all these folks had come from Northern Virginia, and they were all pushing computers in the classroom. And they would get up, each one of them did, and they would say, we need more computers in the classroom. And they had just polite applause. I was sitting by the principal, and I looked at him, and I said, am I wrong, or are they not buying what all these people are selling? And he said, Randy, they think we're just bumpkins out here. We already have computers in our classroom. They said, what these parents here want are a new floor for their gym. And so I walked up to my friend and I said, when you get up there, tell them you want the money to go to a new floor for the gym. And they stood up and applauded. And it wasn't rocket science. It was just a matter of sitting down and listening and not selling the same product I'd been selling because it sold somewhere else. And we need to really think and say, what do we need? You know, the world is changing quickly. You know, what does our Army really need? What's the Navy need? How do we meet that demand? And the last thing, and I just plead with you to do this, you guys are brilliant. I don't say that to puff you up. You really are. People doing modeling and simulation just have some sharp brains. But because you're so smart, you love to explain to everybody how you do what you do. And members of Congress, you lose them. I mean, in 11 seconds. Go in, like Bobby said, and tell them this is what it does. And, you know, this is how it can change the world. When I use the example for New Orleans, for example, I don't tell them how they compute it. I just said it would have told you to get the buses out of New Orleans before the storm hit. You know, and that's the kind of thing we need if we're going to sell modeling simulation. And you've got a great market. This economy, if there's any silver lining, it's modeling simulation because they need you to get where they need to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman.
Let's see. This is, and I don't know if anybody wants to take this, is how is Congress supporting small businesses that provide modeling and simulation training? And how are you supporting small business growth? Anybody want to take that one?
No, I don't want to take that, but I want to mention that one of the largest companies in Gainesville that's generating jobs is modeling and simulation, and it's the music part, it's the entertainment part. And so the investment and the company has grown and grown from, they do video, at music video, and they have the latest technology. As far as STEM is concerned, we really need to come up with how we're going to work with the private public sector to increase the investment. And what I said about making sure people understand what you're doing, you could come and talk to me all you want to, but until I got on the simulation and crashed that plane, and you could change the different flying into New York, I was able to snow, evening, blah. I mean, that hands feel, once you get that member in that room, you got them hooked. So I think it's very important that they get a hands-on experience. And if you can't get the member, get the staff, because they give us the input.
One of the things that one of the things we're doing at this conference, I think, gives you an opportunity to show off some of your wares, and the conferences like this. But one thing that I think is most important is that the government focuses on education so that you have some employees. One of the things we're finding that with the high dropout rate and people just getting a high school education and nothing more, people aren't qualified for the jobs. The last thing we need is for the jobs for people to find they can find better educated workers somewhere else. The very nature of modeling and simulation is that if you can work across the hall from your coworkers, you can work across the globe. And so if you can find better educated workers somewhere else, that's where the businesses are going to go. So we need to make sure that we focus on education, the STEM subjects, to make sure that when you're looking for people to do the kind of work that you need done, that we have an educated workforce that you can hire.
And one other thing, one of the parts of the question was small businesses and how we really help promote them. I think we have to do a better job. I don't have the answer to this, but we've got to do a better job with our procurement and acquisition process for our services to be, and the reason for that is that modeling and simulation, more than any other industry, is not a zero-sum game. I mean, shipbuilding, one company wins, another company loses. Modeling and simulation, if Orlando does well, Virginia does well. Virginia does well, Alabama does well, and right across the country, because it kind of lifts everybody. And one of the things that we find with modeling and simulation is that sometimes the small companies, the startup companies, can become big companies real fast if they're able to get at the table some way. And sometimes they can move in an innovative manner that we need them to move. I just got back from a week in Israel looking at their missile defense systems and talking about how they were able to develop them. And they said if they had gone through normal processes, they still would be working on developing their systems. But they had to bring the private sector in and say, just do it, and they sat around a table for weeks and they created these systems. And sometimes there's a place for the big guys, and sometimes for the medium guys, and sometimes for the small guys, and we've just got to make sure that we've got that table so our services can say, we've got to move quick, and we want all these players at the table, and the guy with the best ideas is the guy we want to be doing the product. And that's what's going to create the kind of innovation we need. We're not there yet, but we want to continue to pursue that and see how we get there. Any more questions?
We're actually running out of time, sir. So any final comments from the panel, from each of the panel members? Any last-minute
Sandy,
wrap-up?
Anything you'd like to say?
No, I think you said it well, and we just have to keep working, all of us together. I like what my colleague, Congresswoman Brown, said about getting the members, or at least their LAs, out to your different areas. See what you have. Get them to actually take part in a simulation. I've done it. I've had my LA with me at one point over in my Volusia County area, and I found out he's not a good shooter. So from now on, I'm going to be using the gun, and he'll be driving. But these things are so important because it really does give them the hands-on ability to see, and it gives them a little bit of piece of that pie, that puzzle, that brings them back to say, hey, I can now understand how this actually saves money. So it's important.
Congresswoman Brown?
I just want to thank you for what you're doing. You are at the cutting edge. It's a lot of questions about the United States and where are we in the world, and whether or not we're going down, D's or whatever. The United States of America is A, and it's A because of you. But we need the information on what we can do sincerely. Doesn't have anything to do with party line. How can we work to support you and that investment to make sure that America is the best it can be? So thank you again.
I want to thank Randy for his leadership in modeling and simulation. He's really been, as Fred mentioned, the visionary. So I just want to ask you to give Randy a round of applause for all of what he's done and really. And finally point out that the budget challenges actually create an opportunity, because we're going to be looking for ways to save a lot of money. So we ought to take advantage of this and show how we can get the job done in a much more cost-effective manner using more modeling and simulation, and we're going to count on you to present those opportunities to us. Thank you very much for what you do.
And as I told you at the beginning, Congressman Scott's mind's always working. He calculated very quickly that there are 4 football fields of displays out there, and we're going to be walking over them. So I just want to encourage you as you see us around. And Eric, could you stand up so Eric knows? Eric's with our staff, and he is a great collector. If you have cards or anything you want to get to any of us, Eric will make sure we get them. But we really do want to hear your ideas so that we can incorporate those into what we're doing. And if we're off base on something, grab us and let us know so that we can get it changed. But Fred, thank you again for a wonderful opportunity to be here. Thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you, Congressman Forbes, and everybody. Thank you so much for being here. A round of applause for these distinguished legislators. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for attending, and thank you for your questions. ITSEC 2011 is officially launched.
Appreciate it.
Welcome, sir.